Hey everyone, it's Steve with Network Advisor. Welcome back. So if you recall, I did a video recently where I tested the Ubiquiti U6 Lite against the Zyxel NWA210AX, and I did that in my home office. I'm going to do another video where I'm comparing the NWA210AX to the Ubiquiti LR. Now, since these are more powerful and probably something more likely to be used in a commercial environment, what better than to go to a commercial environment? So I do have an office that is in a commercial building, and I'll be setting up the experiments in this building so we can get a better idea of how they would perform under the construction type materials that would be used in a commercial setting. All right, let's get started.
Let's begin with a quick unboxing of the units. So like most, it comes with your standard paperwork, and then we have a AC to DC power supply, which also has a separate wall outlet connector. I'm assuming that's because they ship to different regions. Here's the unit itself. This is the NWA210AX. It has roughly the same size footprint as the 110. One major difference you will notice though is in the Ethernet port section. There's actually two Ethernet ports. The yellow uplink one is the one I use to connect to the switch. And then there's the wall mount bracket, and that could mount on the ceiling as well. And there's just kind of like a little slide to clip fit there. Now let's unbox the U6 LR. And there's the unit. It comes with this fancy plastic covering. I guess that's maybe to prevent scratching or chafing during shipment. And then there's just the one Ethernet port there. No spot for an AC adapter, so it's power over Ethernet only. And here's a cute little template with a little level on it there for wall mounting. That's the unit right there that you can use to mount to the ceiling, and there was some writing there to indicate the different configurations. Also, they have this fancy hardware kit. So once you get it out of there, there's the little brackets for the ceilings, sorted screws, and things like that. All right, let me explain the testing setup. So that laptop is an iPerf3 server running on Windows. It's a Core i7, 16 gig RAM, and that network adapter is 2.5 gig. So we follow the red cable over to the multi-gig switch, so we don't have any problems with bandwidth constriction. And there's a router supplying DHCP, and then this black cable is going over to the bench where we'll be testing the access points. This time I'm going to be testing with two devices. So we're going to start with the iPhone 11. What you're seeing here is a screen recorded of my iPhone 11. It's actually two separate tests that are being run at two different times, and then I put them side by side in this recording for you. On the left-hand side is the Ubiquiti. On the right-hand side is the Zyxel. All right, so we can see some disparity here, but Ubiquiti's speeds actually came up a little bit in subsequent testing. Now let's test from the laptop. This laptop has a Wi-Fi 6 network adapter. It's an Intel AX201. Getting connected to the Zyxel 2.4G. And the Windows iPerf doesn't have that cute interface like on the iPhone. It's just a command line that you run, and then you get this scrolling test results. Now the very last line I get after this 10-second test will give me my average. So that last line, 365 megabits per second. All right, now let's switch over to the Ubiquiti 2.4 radio, run the test from the command line again. And if those of you who saw my last video recall, I put all these results together in a spreadsheet. We're going to get to that after we do the 5 gigahertz radio testing in just 1 second. All right, looks like we came in at 105. Okay, let's switch up to the 5 gigahertz radios, and we're still on the iPhone 11. Two separate tests run at different times, but presented here simultaneously for your benefit. Ubiquiti on the left, Zyxel on the right. And also as a reminder, this is a 30-second test which has been sped up to double time for your benefit. And those are some pretty good speeds. If I was getting that kind of throughput on my iPhone 11, I'd be thrilled. All right, let's wrap that up. Okay, let's bring our 5 gigahertz testing back over to the laptop. We're going to start with the Zyxel. So I've got my iPerf command line open. And wow, look at these speeds, 1.2, 1.28, 1.3
gigabits per second. Now you might be wondering, how is this even possible, right? Well, let's go back and take a look at the Zyxel access point. You see that yellow Ethernet port right there? That is a 2.5 gig Ethernet port. And here's the Ubiquiti U6 LR. That Ethernet port is just 1 gig. Now let's get this last bench test done on the Ubiquiti 5G radio. Run our 10-second test. See what kind of speeds we're getting. Decent speeds, kind of similar to the iPhone actually. So then we're going to take a look at the spreadsheet in just 1 second. All right, let's take a moment to review the results of my testing. Now, I won't go through these numbers individually. You can certainly pause the video yourself if you want to scrutinize these very closely. But each test was run 5 times, and then the highest speed and the lowest speed were omitted. The 3 remaining middle speeds were then averaged. So that's how I came up with those bold numbers that you see underneath the columns of numbers. And a couple points I want to make about this spreadsheet before we move on with some more testing. The upper set of numbers is all 2.4 gigahertz radio testing. The lower set of numbers is all the 5 gigahertz testing. And then the first 2 columns, the green and the blue, are the iPhone, and the last 2 green and blue column are the laptop. Also, if you're wondering why there's no minimum maximum under the laptop columns, that's because the iPerf 3 interface is command line, and as all that information scrolls by, there's not an easy way to calculate what the minimum maximum for each iteration was. So that's why those aren't in there. Now let's do something a little more real world. Most people don't sit 30 inches away from an access point on their desk. For the next set of tests, I mounted the access points on the ceiling, the way you would find in a normal office. And then we're going to go out into the hallway, around the corner, and we're going to test from 15 meters line of sight away from the access point. So the signal will have to go through cinder block and some drywall to get to the testing device. Here we are back on the iPhone 11, and while I'm getting this test queued up, I do want to point something out. Getting consistent results when doing Wi-Fi testing is very challenging because so many factors can affect the speed. I want you to know also that what you see in the recordings did not count as the test that went on the spreadsheets. So in some cases, you may see faster or slower on the recordings. And then we're just going to go ahead and move straight into the 5G at this point, and then we'll do the 2 laptop tests afterwards. Now, what was interesting to me here is that I thought the speeds, even though they got cut in half, were still pretty respectable. So if I was that far away from an access point, I'd still be pretty happy to have that kind of throughput. So I'd really prefer to be on 5G over the 2.4G. All right, now it's the laptop's turn to set out in the hallway. We're going to start with the Zyxel 2.4G. I'm going to speed these videos up for you because I know you've kind of seen this before already. Just remember we're in the hallway now. And like I said earlier, the speeds you see on the video may not be what you finally see on the spreadsheet. And the 2.4G was very susceptible to other 2.4G activity or SSIDs in the area. And that was the Ubiquiti. And as we shift gears to do the 5 gigahertz, I did want to show you that I was using a Wi-Fi analyzer so I could monitor all the different channels and Wi-Fi SSIDs that were in this building. All right, we've got the 5 gigahertz on Zyxel. Run this one real quick. Speed did drop quite a bit from the bench test, although still a respectable speed. When we move over to the Ubiquiti, the speeds drop again too. I do want to remind you that this is 15 meters. So a user, even if they were dead center between 2 access points, usually you don't spread them out much more than about 20 meters at the most apart. So theoretically, somebody should never be more than 10 meters apart from an access point. All right, let's take a look at the aggregated testing results from the 15 meters. So this was out in the hallway. And let's compare them against the bench testing. So see how I've got these tabs down here at the bottom. So I'm going to flip over to the previous spreadsheet I showed you a little earlier so you can compare the numbers. So this is when I was bench testing. And then now if I come back to the hallway testing, and then you can pause the video and move your timeline slider back and forth if you want to do a side-by-side comparison. I didn't have a
very easy way to kind of lay it all out for you without it being a complete eye chart. What I did do, though, is made a bar chart here so you could see the difference between the bench testing and the hallway testing. And I made the two graphs the same scale, so it's 0 through 1250 megabits per second. So that's size-wise, those bars are accurate. And I would say that even at 15 meters in a what I would consider to be somewhat hostile Wi-Fi environment, getting this 400 or in that 400 neighborhood throughput is pretty respectable. In most cases, your users will probably be a little bit closer to your access points. I was working off of just one access point. If you had a mesh, then you'd have a little bit better resiliency and potentially better throughput.
What'd you think, huh? I hope you picked up some pieces of useful information in that process. I know for me, one of the things I took away was how tricky and challenging it can be to test out 2.4G Wi-Fi in a multi-tenant environment. Now, why is that? Well, because this building has lots of different individual offices in it, several of which have their own Wi-Fi SSIDs broadcasting out into the hallways and other suites. And I noticed that even the time of day could make a big difference depending on whether there was idle access points or whether there was lots of people consuming Wi-Fi. All right, so anyway, what are our takeaways here? Well, in general, the Zyxel was faster for throughput, partly because it has that 2.5 gig Ethernet connector on the access point, while the Ubiquiti only has the 1 gig. But also, what I noticed was that, like I said, the 2.4 gigahertz radios were a lot more inconsistent depending on what was going on in the environment. Whereas the 5G, while it did deteriorate the throughput when you moved, out into the hallway, like I demonstrated, it was still pretty good throughput. And I think what I would do is try to get all my users on the 5G if possible. And the 2.4G would be good for maybe Internet of Thing type devices, maybe like devices that don't belong to users or where the speed doesn't matter as much. In any case, I hope you found that useful or enlightening. I do appreciate your viewership. I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks so much.